Hi, I'm Pia Joy from Rajagiri Center for Business Studies, and here with me is Professor, and we are going to talk about sustainable practices in.
Absolutely. So I'm Professor Timothy Palmer from Western Michigan University, and I direct our college's Center for Sustainable Business Practices. And so my job at my business school is to try to make sure that our business students all have an understanding about how they can not only do well in their functional areas, marketing, HR, finance, but also use their skills to do good things in the community. So do good for their company, but also do good for the community at the same time. So that's what my job is really about, and I teach sustainability classes to undergraduate students, to MBA students. I teach here at Rajagiri, sometimes in the PGDM program, and so that's a little bit about me.
Okay, now let's start. So, can you provide an overview of sustainable business practices being implemented at the university?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have a center within our business school that's about sustainability. All of our BBA students take a required course in sustainability, and so every one of our students, regardless of their academic major in business, is exposed to sustainable business practices. So that's true in the business school. It's not true in other colleges in our university, in like liberal arts and engineering, in health and human services. There are some courses, but there's no other college, unlike ours, that has a required course. But certainly there are business sustainability practices across campus.
Okay. So, what are the key focuses on the area of sustainable practices?
Do you mean from a teaching perspective
Yeah.
or from a company's perspective?
Both.
Yeah, so for a company's perspective, it's an opportunity for a company to think about how do we not only make money, which we have to make a profit, but at the same time use our company's skills to make communities stronger, to work on issues like healthcare, education, gender equality. Companies have incredible power to be able to make positive change in the world, environmental issues, climate change. And yet historically we've only thought about companies as all they care about is making money, all they care about is profit. And that's just too short term. I mean, you have to have a planet and a society that's thriving for companies to be successful. And so I think that whole mentality is changing among firms, that we can both do well financially and be successful, but at the same time have a positive impact on the world, not just a negative impact. I mean, in the past, companies would try to do things like, they don't pay as high wages as they could because that saves them money. Or they take their dirty effluent water from their factories and dump it into a river because that's inexpensive to do that. That's not healthy in the long term. It's not good for the company, it's not good for the community. And so I think companies are beginning to realize that there's another way to do business. Plan A is what we call business as usual, the old way, short-term profit motive. Plan B, the new way, is to think about, yes, we need to be profitable, but we can be profitable while we also do well for the planet and for the community. And from an educational perspective, it's realigning the way our students think, because I think they come into a business school thinking about profitability. That's what they've been told to think about. And I think that it's hopeful for students to think about, they care about things like climate change. I'm sure you all care about climate change. You're worried about climate
Yes.
change. If you could work for a company that also cared about climate change, whose values aligned with your values, wouldn't that be great?
Yes.
Yeah, it would be. And so I think that's what, students are coming to realize, that there's a way for them to both get a good business education, at the same time grow in their own personal values, and then hopefully have a contribution once they graduate in the companies, the firms that they work for.
So, how do students at university engage with sustainable practices?
They do it in a number of ways. So they can do it through coursework. Certainly there's classes. There are some student organizations on campus that are focused on environmental issues. So we, for example, have a student group on campus that's all focused on climate change. And students are interested in learning about climate change, reading about it, and then thinking about ways that they can have an impact in their careers or in their personal jobs. We have our university has got about 20,000 students. We have a student organization, and like there's a president that's elected by the entire student body, a vice president. One of the officer roles is actually an officer for sustainability, because I think young people and students care about that issue. And so our student body from across the entire university has got an elected official whose focus is on giving students chances to think about sustainability. Our students actually, at the entire university, and this is not just the business school, voted on several years ago a required sustainability fee. And so each semester when they get their bill from the university and they pay their fees for tuition, and so on, there's a small charge added for sustainability initiatives on campus. And one of those, which is really an attractive thing, is an opportunity for students to apply for a grant associated with sustainability. So let's say, for example, you were really interested in composting and food waste. But let's say, and I think Rajagiri does a good job of it, our university doesn't. If you're living in we call them residence halls, a dormitory, and there was no way to compost food, you could think of an idea on your own. How could you do that? And you could think about what are the costs that I would have, and then write a grant to the student government to get that funded. And there's wonderful ideas that students have across a whole range of different things. We have study abroad programs. We have a number of study abroad programs that are focused on sustainability. I actually lead one of those. I bring students every December to India, sometimes to Rajagiri and to Kerala, Cochin, sometimes to Christ University in Bangalore. In December, I took students to Darjeeling in West Bengal. 2 weeks, students from business, from engineering, from health and human services, but our focus is on sustainability. Some of it's environmental issues, some of it's social issues. We visit companies and we learn from their chief sustainability officers what the companies like Tata Consultancy Services or Infosys, Wipro in the tech sector. We learn from companies about what their sustainability initiatives are. And then we also go to NGOs because those are the folks that are really dealing with serious, hard issues on the ground. So we visit with them. And it's an amazing experience for our students about sustainability, but on a more global way. So those are just some examples.
Are there any specific program or initiative that involve international collaboration or study abroad opportunities?
Well, so I mentioned that study abroad opportunity. I do get some international students on my study abroad, but the other side of it is when I bring students to India on study abroad, one of our partner universities in Bangalore, Christ University, has a program called the Indian Buddies, and that's what they call it. And it's an opportunity when we visit their campus for a week or for 2 weeks, each of my students, and this year I had 28 who came with me to India, is paired up with one Indian student. And whenever we're not involved in programming, at our site visits with our companies, the buddies get together one-on-one, and it's a wonderful time for them to learn about their own different cultures, their hopes, their dreams, and so on, without having, the grown-ups, the professors around them. So they can just go out to dinner on their own, they can go out shopping, they can do whatever they want to do. And it's a small way to create some internationalization in it, but as much as I try to create this really valuable study abroad experience, my students tell me the best thing are the Indian buddies, which I have little to do with that. We put them together, but the groups together, but the students just become friends.
Okay, so how does the students' previous academic performance, test score, and potential for visa application process?
So ask that question again. So you're asking about student success.
Academic performances, test scores for the previous year's scores, making them use for next year's application process, visa applications.
So for a visa application to go to the United States, yeah, so there I need to be somewhat careful because that's not in my area of expertise. Okay. It's pretty competitive. I think students especially have to, for our school, for example, you need to take the GMAT to get into our MBA program. It's a very difficult exam. I took it a couple of times before I got into an MBA program. I had to really work at it. You have to show English proficiency as well. And so, especially if you're interested in a graduate program, and this doesn't matter if you're an international student or even a domestic, for us, an American student, it's a totally different level of work. Yeah, the expectations are much higher, and they therefore want to be certain that any student, domestic for us or international, is capable and qualified and has the desire to do that kind of work. I think the work experience is helpful too, and they'll look at that whole portfolio. They'll look at your academic standing, they'll look at your entrance exam scores, but they also consider, and this isn't just our graduate programs, that's many in the United States, will look at your work experience, because you're going to be studying alongside other students who are oftentimes in their maybe in their 30s, who are working in companies, and they want students who can bring something new and interesting to those discussions they have in the classroom, because courses are very interactive. It's a lot of discussion, professor to student, but student to student as well. And so they want students who can talk about what their experiences are, and therefore if a student hasn't had a particular job that they've worked on for a couple of years, then it's the internships that are really important, that you'll be able to talk about what you did, not just what you know from studying and from courses, but from what you've done. So I think my point is that they look at a wide array or different factors when they're considering an applicant for school.
So what are some unique courses or experimental learning opportunities offered to students interested in sustainable business practices?
Well, I'll give you one good example, and I know they do this at Rajagiri as well.
So what are the scholarship opportunities available for international students?
Well, I will tell you that scholarship opportunities for many students it's a difficult time right now, and it might vary by where you're interested in going to school, and I can just tell you, in our university, enrollments are going down, they're not going up, unlike India where enrollments are going up. And so when enrollments are decreasing, there's less funding in general available, and many of the scholarships would therefore go to domestic students. And our country right now the United States has a very difficult immigration policy, but there's other countries, and I don't know a lot about it. Canada, for example, they may not have scholarship opportunities, now they think about it, but if you go to Canada to get your MBA or graduate degree, you pay full tuition, but then you're guaranteed citizenship in Canada, which is very attractive to an international student. So I don't know of specific scholarships available. Many of my students ask about work opportunities when they come on campus. And part of the visa issue, if you're an international student, is that your educational visa won't allow you to work off campus. You can only work on campus. And so you're limited to perhaps being a teaching assistant for a faculty or a research assistant, or working on our landscaping crews or in our dining halls and so on. Because I'd say at least 2/3 of my international students that I've worked with want to secure some sort of a job, because studying abroad is expensive, and I think that's why you're asking about scholarships. I don't think there are many available from my school, right? And I don't know if that's true at other schools, but therefore work-study jobs on campus is one opportunity that it's not exactly free money, you have to work for it, but there are funds available.
So how does the university integrate real-world experiences into academic curriculums?
Well, I've mentioned that having students do internships. We also have something called externships, where, unlike an internship where it might be a full semester where you're working within a company, our internships are all required to be for pay, so students aren't just volunteering their time, and it could be in any different types of companies. But we also have these externships where they're very limited in time, and it might be with, again, any type of company, but you go there for just a couple of days and you job shadow people. And if your interest is in HR, you might be job shadowing somebody that's their functional area. If your area is marketing or advertising, you might be job shadowing somebody in that area. If it's supply chain, and so on. And that typically happens early in a student's academic career. So before they've chosen their majors necessarily and they've committed to the coursework, they're still exploring, what am I interested in? And so a student might do a number of these externships, 2 or 3 days a piece, where they're getting exposed to the area, the functional area, without yet really committing in a big way. So that's another way. So internships, externships, study abroad, another good example of an active-based way to get some experience.
So what are some unique courses or experiential learning opportunities offered to students in this field of development?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the courses that I'd like to teach involves what we call service learning. It's very application based, and so what typically happens is that a student of mine in my classes will be paired up with an NGO, and during the semester they'll be working with an NGO on whatever project the NGO has for them to do. And then while they're working on that project, they're theoretically learning about sustainability issues, they're learning about social issues, they're learning about poverty or homelessness or health, but they're also developing their business skills, which is really why it's part of the business course. They're building teamwork skills because they're working with a group within the NGO, they're working on communication skills, they're working on leadership skills, and therefore it's what we call a win-win. It's a win for the NGO because they're getting business student talent, and then it's a win for the student because they're getting practical experiences. And as I mentioned before, when you're trying to get into a graduate program, or even to get a job, if you're interviewing for a job, the interviewee isn't only going to care about your grades, your marks, and how well you've done in school. They want to know what you've done, what your experiences are. And that can come from an internship, but it can also come from this community-based active learning, experiential learning, service learning. And many of my students in their interviews will actually talk about those experiences. And that's what really is important for a recruiter. When they ask questions like, tell me about a time when you struggled on with a problem. These assignments are often way out of our students' comfort zones. It's very different. It's not like working for a company, and so it gives them a really good opportunity to talk about what they've done. So that's just one example of how we can integrate sustainability in an active, experiential way into our courses. And actually, we're thinking about designing classes where the whole class is about that kind of service learning experience. What I was describing was it's embedded within a course that has lectures and it has exams, and the student is doing a service learning opportunity or experience. We're actually thinking about designing classes where the whole course is that experience, and the faculty would mentor the students as they're involved in that service learning experience.
So what are the main challenges faced in promoting sustainable development practices, and how is the university addressing them?
The main challenge, I think, from the university's perspective is that sustainability is relatively new. And I think that many universities care about it. I know that students care about it. But when you have programs that have been in place for a long time, let's say it's a PGDM program, or it's an MBA program, or it's a master's in social work, or it's whatever. Those programs are, they're being assessed, they're accredited, faculty are hired to teach in those programs. And so you might be interested in creating a new program in sustainability, and maybe it's a new certificate program in sustainability in the business school, or maybe it's a new major in sustainability. But especially when budgets are already tight, if you're trying to create something new, you need new resources, you need new faculty, you've got to You've got to recruit students. You've got to advertise. And that takes resources. And it probably is going to take resources away from some other existing program. And those people don't want to give up their resources, and so it becomes, it's a financial challenge. It's also can be a political challenge, within the university. And I think sustainability is one of those areas. Who can disagree with the importance of sustainability right now? But if you're a director of a program that's maybe not as cutting edge, you still don't want to see it go away, even if maybe that's where the resources have to come from. And that's a challenge. I don't think the challenge is that there's not enough students out there. I think there are. Another challenge is that many faculty, they're not trained in sustainability. I wasn't trained in sustainability. My PhD is in strategic management. Sustainability didn't even exist. I mean, there were always environmental issues and concerns, but the concept of sustainability didn't exist. So there are no PhD programs in sustainability. It's hard to find even a master's program in sustainability. There are some, and they're being created now, but they don't exist. My point is that even if you wanted to create a program, a degree program in sustainability, who are you going to hire? What faculty are you going to hire to even teach those classes? Because there aren't many of them. So, I mean, money's always an issue, or resources generally, money, faculty, right? Taking money from someplace else, politics, right? Some of the challenges.
Yeah, so what are the US and universities' plan for future enhancement or the international education focus in the coming years?
Well, that's always an issue, and I can only speak from the American context, and in my university in particular, is that internationalization of the curriculum has always been important, and in the business school especially, because the economies are becoming very global, where yes, you hear about nationalism and you hear about Americans, or you hear about Indians, you hear about Germans, but economies are becoming really intertwined, right? Which means then that our students have to understand that global context. It's not just about how we do business in the United States. It's how do we do business in the context of a global economy. Therefore, our students have to get exposure to international concepts. They need international experiences. We therefore have international marketing classes, international HR classes, global business classes that students take. I've talked about study abroad opportunities, so those are occurring. We have a whole host of international relationships with colleges and universities around the world, and we're very proud of our 25-year relationship with Rajagiri as an example. The fact that I as a faculty member can come from my university to teach at Rajagiri, or I can bring my students to Rajagiri for 2 weeks to explore business in the context of the state of Kerala. Or that we can have Rajagiri students maybe do 2 years at Rajagiri for an undergraduate and 2 years at my university, or an MBA student that can maybe do 1 year at Rajagiri and 1 year at my university. So we're interested in sending faculty and students abroad. We're also interested in having students and faculty come to us.
So what are some popular study abroad programs in USA?
Are you asking about, am I aware of study abroad programs at certain universities?
Yeah, what are available in USA study abroad programs?
Yes, in sustainability.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, it's a pretty new topic. It's a pretty new field right now, and therefore there are not many true sustainability programs, like a graduate degree in sustainability or an undergraduate degree. There are some. At the undergraduate level, our university has an environmental and sustainability studies undergraduate program or core program. But other than programs, there's also just many courses. Right? So that you may not find many true, like you're going to get a master's degree in business sustainability. There's not many of those that exist yet. They're starting to occur. There's certainly many courses in sustainability. The newest area though, and part of this is because, again, we talked about resources. It's difficult to create new programs, but you can create what are called certificates And let's say, for example, you're interested in getting a master's degree in business and finance, right? And so that's your program of study, but you really care about sustainability. You might be able to couple that master's degree with a certificate in sustainability that has a certain number of, and I don't know the number, 3-4 courses that are focused on sustainability. And that way, when you graduate, you have your master's degree, but you're able to show a recruiter that you really care about sustainability as well because of that certificate program. There are many certificate programs that are being created because it's less expensive to do. It's easier to set them up because you can look across the university where there are many sustainability courses and couple them, put them together to create a certificate. And so I think right now, especially as the field is growing, more and more students care about it. You'll start to see more undergraduate degrees in sustainability in business, but also in other academic disciplines, graduate programs as well. And PhD, is the same thing. Right now, there's that I know of, any PhD in business sustainability. This doesn't exist. And so what you would do instead is get a PhD in strategic management, but then do your research in sustainability so that when you're on the job market, you can talk about your business skills, but also your passion for sustainability. And therefore, it just takes some creativity for the student to put those programs or a certificate on top of a degree, put them together, because ultimately you want to learn more about sustainability, but you also want to show a recruiter through evidence, through a degree, through a certificate, that you were that committed. And so some of the burden's on the student too.